Sexual harassment allegations continue to plague Senator Al Franken. Today, Melanie Morgan decided to confront Senator Grope himself, who she accused of harassing her 17 years ago. Morgan went to Franken's Capitol Hill office. She brought with her two women who accused Bill Clinton of sexual misconduct, groping, grabbing, and in one case, rape. Kathleen Willey, Juanita Broderick. Not surprisingly, Senator Franken would not see them. Take a look.
Well, you can tell Al Franken hello from Melanie Morgan. He might not remember me, but I sure remember him very clearly, 17 years later.
We did reach out to Franken's office for a statement about what happened today. We haven't heard back. Joining us now from the media equalizer, Melanie Morgan, and two women who have accused President Clinton of sexual misconduct, Juanita Broderick, Kathleen Willey. Juanita, let me start with you. I remember when I interviewed you. I remember first Lisa Myers interviewed you first. I interviewed you second. And I took the time to interview all those women at the time. Jennifer Flowers has been vindicated now. We saw his conduct with Monica Lewinsky. So a lot of lying went on. And I remember Lisa Myers said something. She called you and said, the problem is you are too credible. I want you to explain the story and what the Clinton machine did to you.
You know, Sean, that was probably one of the hardest times of my life. I had absolutely spilled out my heart and soul in that interview. I had finally decided to do it with Lisa Myers and NBC. And it was supposed to have been broadcast 2 weeks after they filmed it. And it was about 2 weeks later, and Lisa calls. And she says, well, they're still doing more investigating. Mr. Lack wants to have more investigating done. And it was disappointing to me because I had just been gone through the ringer. Okay, so she said, well, there's a problem. There's good news and there's bad news. And I said, yes. And she said, the good news is you're credible. And I said, what's the bad news? And she said, you're very credible. Now, how do you take something like that? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, it went on for another 5 weeks before they showed it, and showed it opposite the Grammys on a Friday night, I believe.
Let's talk about the things that were said, the attacks that were made against you by Clinton supporters and
oh yeah, that I was lying, that I had lied in my affidavit, that I was having an affair with another man, which was true. But my first marriage was over. They just hunted for anything that they could to try to bring me down. Of course I lied in my affidavit. I was scared to death of the Clinton machine.
30 years later.
Yeah.
We've had 30 years, though, of so many women that have gone through this. Kathleen, you're one of them. You went to the White House. You had known Clinton. You were a volunteer. And your story is he groped, grabbed, fondled, touched, and kissed you against your will.
Yes, yes, he did.
And what happened to you? What did the Clinton machine do to you?
They put me through 2 years of holy terror. They followed me. They terrorized me. There were people sneaking around my house at 3 o'clock in the morning. They killed 2 of my pets. They threatened my children 2 days before my deposition in the Paula Jones case. They told me I wasn't getting the message. They knew where my children lived and that everybody better be careful. I lived in fear and terror for 2 years.
Let me ask you.
I still look over my shoulder.
Melanie, I want to ask you, because we saw the picture of Franken and Leanne Tweeden asleep. I had an experience where Franken is nuts. Right here at the Fox studios. It's a different, not in the same way, not in the same vein, nothing, but unhinged is the only way I can describe him. You had that experience. You confronted him. I want you to address the 30-year, what happened today, and the 30 years of Clinton and their defenders and Democrats threading every needle up until and including last year's election, and now the position they're taking.
First of all, I want to say that I've had the opportunity to spend the last 24 hours with 3 of the bravest women I have ever met in my entire life, Kathleen Willey, Juanita Broderick, and Leslie Milwee. And I consider it an honor to be able to invite them here to Washington, and they joined me on Capitol Hill, where we confronted at least the staffers of Senator Al Franken, who was cowering behind the door of his office because he refused to meet us. All these years later, it is so important, 30 years later, it is so important important to revisit history if we're going to learn for our future generations of our daughters and of our sons, of our grandchildren. If we don't learn from Bill Clinton and what he did to these poor women and the exercise of power and abuse of these women, how are we going to teach our sons how to behave appropriately?
You know, we
That's
keep
why
hearing
I'm
from
calling out
Democrats. All of a
Franken.
sudden, Democrats, after the election from last year, oh, the day of reckoning for the Clintons is coming. A little late, and it seems a little politically expedient because she's not running.
No, and you know what? I just want to say that Congressman Conyers, Captain Underpants, as I refer to him, and Al Frankengroper, they need to go. And that's what we have to say to all of America. And I would like to ask all of your listeners, if I could, Sean, to put some pressure on the majority and minority leaders in both houses of Congress to ask these two men to resign. They're clinging to power. I understand that Conyers has left the District of Columbia. He's flown back on coach, by the way, to Michigan, to his home state. But Al Franken seems to think that if he just waits this storm out, that it'll all pass. But we haven't forgotten. I will not forget. Kathleen won't forget. All of these women, we have to stop sexual harassment now, and we have to hold all people in Congress accountable for their power.
And stop using our money to pay off their deals with people. All right, last question, Juanita and Kathleen. It's 30 years of you basically have been abused and not believed. Now liberals have changed their tune. What message do you have to them, Juanita, and then Kathleen?
You know, the message that I have is it's a little late. You know, I would like to have had that belief many years ago. And I don't believe we would be getting it now where the Clintons not on their way down. It's hard to believe that they truly mean what they're saying.
Well said. Kathleen?
I believe it's the same thing that Juanita does. It's a little too late. And I think their apologies that we've heard so far are empty apologies. The only reason that they made them is because they were caught. And like Melanie said, I hope that everyone in this country will call their congressmen and their senators and demand to know the names of the people on the list that are $17 million paid for their sexual harassment cases, and remind them.
Let it come out of their pocket. I agree with you.
We pay them. We pay them, and they owe us answers.
Absolutely. All right. I know it's hard for you guys to go back to this. We really appreciate you being with us. Thank you all.
Thanks you so much, Sean.